Usually I would respect people's differing opinions, but that is just wrong. Hello, my name is Bianca, and today I'm going to be reading negative reviews of some of my favorite anime and manga series. Editing Bianca popping in to tell you that we're only talking about one series because people came home and started making a lot of noise, so I couldn't finish filming. But definitely expect a part 2 or 3 because there were other series I really wanted to talk about. So this video idea was inspired by a trend I'd seen on YouTube where people read and react to negative reviews, usually 1-star reviews of some of their favorite books. So yeah, I'm hoping this is a good time. I don't think I'm gonna be getting super angry. I'm not that type of person. So now the reviews I'm gonna be reading today are from the oh so reliable My Anime List. When you're on My Anime List and you add an anime, you can rate it between 1 and 10. So because the whole point of this video is to read bad or negative reviews, I selected reviews that rated my faves a 4 or lower. I didn't read any, I just went through, looked at the ratings, and then screenshotted and then just like put them away. I will admit that there were a few reviews that I skipped because they were very long and I am really lazy. Anyway, we're gonna get started with a series that I hold very near to my heart, KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN. Okay, so starting off with our first negative review of KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN, we have one that gave it a 4. That just means bad, at least it's not a 1. So this review says,
Reborn is a generic shonen. People may tell you it's more than that, but really it isn't. The story is pretty interesting for a shonen. A mafia story sounds cool, right?
Yeah, it does.
Sadly, we have a terrible protagonist, which whines a lot. Characters like Shinji and Camille do this a lot as well, but the reasons are justified in their series, as they do have actual mental issues. Suna does not show this. Yes, you can say it's an effing shonen, but Hunter x Hunter had a psychologically distraught protagonist as well.
Okay, so one of the biggest critiques I've heard about KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN is that they find Suna annoying and that he's a crybaby, which, you know, that's your opinion. I don't know if it's because I read KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN when I was older than Suna, because I read the series when I was in high school, like 15, 16 years old, and Suna's like 13. So even as like a 15, 16-year-old, I was like, oh, a 13-year-old kid? That's a child, you know? So I can understand why Suna whines and cries a lot. I disagree that he is a terrible protagonist. I think he goes through tremendous character development. Like, he's not the same person he was at the beginning when we get to the end, even though he'd like to believe that he is. I can't really compare Suna to Shinji or Camille because I haven't watched those series, but for Shinji, I know that he also gets called like a crybaby, but I think from what I know about Neon Genesis Evangelion that based on the things that he goes through, I think it's warranted. Okay, let's continue.
Suna is a generic high school teenager which has the hots for some girl and doesn't have the balls to do anything about it. Standard shonen cliches.
He's 13, bro.
The art is fairly mediocre.
Usually I would respect people's differing opinions, but that is just wrong. Akira Amano's art is beautiful. I just realized that this is reviewing the anime, so it's not technically criticizing Akira Amano's art because that I would not forget, but since it's the anime and it's technically not actually Akira Amano's art, okay, I guess.
Okay, and it says, the action scenes look alright for a shonen, but everything else looks so bland and generic, especially the character designs.
I would disagree. I feel like KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN has very distinct characters, and the only bland characters I think are intentionally bland. Like Yamamoto, I feel like was designed to be a bland, generic character. Like, he's a Japanese boy who loves baseball. Like, that's pretty basic. But the thing about him is that he has the potential to be like one of the world's best assassins, and I love that.
Okay, the soundtrack is very forgettable as well. Nothing really stands out except for the openings. They are pretty great. I think I like all the Reborn openings, which is really rare. The last one is my least favorite though.
I say the soundtrack is anything but unforgettable. Suna's theme, Hibari's theme, the theme for The Guardians 10 years later, the Millefiore Byakuran theme, those are all memorable. Like, I can hear them in my head right now as I am mentioning them to you guys. Like, they're all good. They all slap. So
The characters, damn it, the characters. I think I already talked about Suna enough. He is a standard generic shonen protagonist who wants to protect his friends. Also, he doesn't want to become a mafioso. Even if it runs in his family's tree, his character is just so infuriating. And the other main characters are fairly forgettable as well. Only character I really remember fondly was Hibari because he didn't give a damn about anything that happened. None of the characters get a huge amount of significant development for a 200 and something episode series.
I mean, it's a shonen. Like, you have to have your shonen cliches in a shonen, I feel like, because that's what makes it a shonen. So the whole, like, I need to protect my friend is pretty standard. I don't think it matters that it's in his family tree because he didn't know about that until, you know, Reborn showed up and was like, hey, you're gonna be the 10th boss of the strongest mafia family. Of course Suna's gonna be like, no. Okay, as for the other characters being forgettable and not getting any development, I say I kind of agree and kind of disagree. I think characters like Yamamoto and Gokudera probably get like the most development out of the Guardians. There are other characters that didn't get like as much development. Like, I think Bianchi didn't really get much. Ryohei, I'd say kind of gets some, but not as much as he should have considering he was a Guardian. Haru, Kyoko, basically the same. Okay, I can't say that this review is complete and utter garbage because at least they were able to appreciate Hibari, so this person has some semblance of taste.
There's also quite a lot of filler in Reborn, especially in the future arc with the girls cooking food and going on strike.
Yes, I agree. I could have done without that. I think it's completely unnecessary, and honestly, I would have not included the girls in the future arc at all because they did nothing. The only thing they did was, one, get in the way, and two, be used against Suna and the rest of his family. This brings up a whole nother conversation about how the women in KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN, not the best written at all. Like, I can make a whole separate video about this. Even though I'm a big fan of Reborn, like, I acknowledge that this is probably its biggest flaw in my opinion, or at least it's something that really bugs me.
Let's see, while I do have a lot of complaints with the story and the characters, I did enjoy myself with the show. It was a fun, cheesy shonen. Just don't bother with the manga, it gets even worse, especially with the manga ending, which I won't spoil. Overall, Hitman Reborn is a fun, generic shonen. It does hold a special place in my heart though, because it was one of my first shows I ever watched when I first got into anime.
I think some valid criticisms were brought up, but there were also things that I cannot agree with, like the soundtrack being forgettable. Really?
Really?
This next review also gave the series a 4, so it reads,
I decided to pick this up since my friend was going on about this like he does with One Piece, so I decided to give it a shot. The first 20 episodes are a real killer, since that's where a lot of people are like, okay, what is this? Can we get to some sort of story / action already?
yes, the daily life arc is a little hard to get through. I think I was able to get through it the first time because I knew about the stuff that was to come. They seem very fillerish and unimportant, and I would say maybe half of them, a little over half of them, are like not important. But I do go back to those first 20 episodes because I think they're charming, and you know, life was so much easier for the characters back then. Like, it was silly, and you know, no one was trying to kill them, and like the fate of the world, multiple worlds didn't rest on their shoulders, so they're fun after you know like the entire context of the show.
The show loves to put fillers within the arc and loves to have recap episodes and tries to play it off like it's really part of the story, though it's not as bad as Naruto. So occasionally I would say something similar to this. Really? That was an episode? Come on, it should be better than this. You will know which episodes will be recaps and you can skip them if you choose to.
That's actually true. They do have a couple of recap episodes that I honestly skip. When I'm watching KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN, I'm usually binge watching it, so I just skip over the recap because I was literally just watching the previous episode. And also, what sucks about KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN is that eventually you don't really have full episodes because the beginning is like 5 minutes of recap, and then at the end you sometimes have like the Haru Haru interviews or the Zodiac thing, and that takes like 5-ish minutes, and then plus you add the outro, that's like 7-8 minutes, so then in total you probably have an episode of actual plot and content that's like 13 to 15 minutes, so that sucks. Okay, next review gave KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN a 1, and if you recall, a 1 means appalling, so let's do this.
I get the feeling there are little to non-critical reviews for KHR, so I'm gonna give it a try. And yes, I am biased and a bad writer.
Okay, thank you for the forewarning.
KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN starts as a gag series with flat humor. After 20 episodes, it shifts to a shonen fight. With that change, the overall comedy elements get lessened, but they are still present. Yes, that's true.
From my understanding, originally KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN was a gag comedy manga, and then eventually like more traditional shonen elements were introduced, I think, to boost up sales. So that's why like the first 20 episodes, or like the daily life arc, is very different from other arcs.
The comedy in KHR is mostly aimed at children and does not have any deeper elements to it, except for some absurd showings of their running gags edging to satire. As said, the comedy is mainly made out of simple character traits and resulting running gags or punchlines. Each and every character in the show gets their own trademark line or trait, something like Dere archetype, just a bit more overdrawn and without any good explanation for that behavior. But we'll later have a look at the characters.
I mean, the demographic is like young boys. No, that does not necessarily mean that only young boys read like shonen series, but that is the demographic, that's their target audience. So if it has like some childish humor, then I guess that's the reason why.
What most people really appreciate about this anime is the action that starts after like 20 episodes. Similar to the humor, the action has no proper build-up. An essential element of a shonen battle would be an exciting and diverse training that makes the character overcome an obstacle and lets them grow as a character. Sadly, we don't really get to see any real struggle. The characters just get a new ability or are suddenly just stronger than before. So the most important thing for a good written, growing character is missing, and we get to watch the same cast without any changes for 203 episodes.
I'm actually not the biggest fan of training arcs, so maybe that's why I'm a fan of KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN, but I like that in the training arcs that we do see the characters struggle before they're able to kind of like figure it out or get it together. So I do disagree with the whole thing about the cast not changing at all for 203 episodes, because while there are some characters that again don't get any development, I think there are even more that do get proper development, at least in my opinion.
Let's have a look at the characters. All of them are presented as simple-minded beings, only showing us their one character trait used for comedic purposes. The main character, Suna, is a crybaby, and after 200 episodes he still is.
Again, I disagree. Yes, he still cries about and whines about being a mafia boss, but I feel like he does that intentionally because he doesn't want to admit to himself that, hey, maybe I am kind of built for this. I don't know.
The only character development we get is in his desperation mode. He gets super badass, taking on every burden, every enemy, every fight, but the sudden changes makes the character absurd, and every obstacle he overcomes gets boring to watch.
I think as the series progresses, it becomes less of a sudden change because his desperation mode is just him, you know, and as the series progresses, he becomes more badass and like he is in desperation mode.
Okay, all in all, it felt dragging and boring. Even the hyped up moments were lame because the whole series lacked a good writing and build-up.
Okay, I get it. It's your opinion.
I hope I could help people with this review, or people who disagree with me are able to see my points.
I'm able to see some points, other points I disagree with a lot. Okay, this next review gives KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN a 3, which if I recall, that means they think it's very bad.
It's been about 4 or 5 years since I watched the entirety of this anime in about 2 weeks.
2 weeks? I think it took me a bit longer.
The problem is that the only thing I consciously remember is that how many times I questioned myself, why in the name am I watching it? Oh no. To be fair, the premise and overall tone of Reborn isn't anything out of the ordinary. It's just so painfully average in everything it does, and beyond that, it sucks any enjoyment out of the viewing experience by being slow-paced as hell.
It's okay. It's okay. People can disagree. People can disagree with you.
Usually, your typical shonen humor is already quite annoying to begin with.
Then why are you watching shonen? I don't know. I feel like sometimes people, like, if you don't like a genre, why are you still watching or reading in that genre? Like, the genre isn't gonna change to kind of satisfy you, unfortunately. Like, that's not how it works.
Don't get me wrong, it's not like I hate it, but most of the time it's the same repeated joke over and over again. The only difference being it's in another anime. In Reborn, the same joke gets rehashed so many times that I simply had the urge to gouge my eyes out.
Okay. This person really doesn't like KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN.
Combine that with the already slow progressing story and you get a recipe for disaster. And now for the final nail in the coffin. Everything in this anime feels, at least to me, very uninspired. To point out something I mentioned earlier, the premise feels very generic, but isn't that quite odd? I mean, one of the selling points, one of the only unique things about KHR should be that it combines elements of the Italian mafia life and shonen tropes. The big fat problem with that is that the part of the Italian mafia is so irrelevant to the plot that the character Reborn also could have been a Navy SEAL and it wouldn't change a thing. And it's not just the premise, it's also things like the soundtrack.
No! Don't diss the soundtrack!
I mean, wow, giving a character like Ryohei, who's a boxer, a theme that just very slightly resembles the theme of another very popular fictional boxer, that speaks creativity. In case you didn't catch this one, Ryohei's theme is almost a carbon copy of Rocky Balboa's theme.
There are things called homages, there are things that inspire other things.
TLDR, the anime is very average in a lot of categories, but on top of that, it is also very creativeless, and due to the slow pacing and the repetition of the same old joke, it gets very boring very quickly. Not recommended at all.
Okay. This last review gives KATEKYO HITMAN REBORN a 3. Okay, let's do this.
I used to love this back when I was 15 or so. Times do change things, huh?
I mean, I started it when I was like 15 and I still love it, so sometimes times don't change that much.
It's clear that the author didn't plan the series to go as far as it went. First several chapters present a mostly slice-of-life manga focused on comedy, but eventually the author realized that it's a jump title, so booyah. Here comes some bad fighting arcs from here all the way to the end with a tinge of badly written science fiction.
Again, I must disagree because I love the Varia arc. I think it's amazing, and the future arc is really good too. It has some amazing battles. Like, this pains me. Not as much as the soundtrack disc, but this pains me.
The problem with this series is repetition.
That's been a consistent thing in these reviews.
Which is not an abnormal thing when it comes to jump titles, but it's just too damn much. The last arc, which was supposed to answer questions about some of the biggest mysteries of the manga, is just a mess of a tournament arc with lots of fan service and barely any plot.
You're not wrong, actually. You're not wrong. But, you know, maybe we got all the fan service because, you know, we weren't gonna get any more, and I wanted more.
On that point, KHR barely has any plot or character development, even though some characters like Gokudera and Yamamoto have interesting backgrounds and ideals. Most of it just gets drowned in pointless fighting or repetitive comedy chapters. Every single potential development is wasted. Some characters are interesting, the art is great, but everything goes down the drain because we surely need Suna to get new gloves and fight people he doesn't want to fight, but he does so anyway since, you guessed it, it's Jump. To be clear, it's not a problem to be a Jump title or use shonen manga cliche. The good part about Jump manga is what authors do within those cliches to set them apart. KHR barely tries and clearly fails.
Okay, so this person is obviously comparing KATEKYO HITMAN Reborn to, I think, more modern series that, again, have like subverted some tropes, have like changed them up a bit. And I'm saying this because this review is from March 29th, 2020. So very recent. I mean, yeah, KATEKYO HITMAN Reborn is full of like repetitive elements and like cliches, but what early shonen series isn't? You know, if you compare it to like Jujutsu Kaisen or like Chainsaw Man or Black Clover, like obviously KATEKYO HITMAN Reborn is just going to be riddled with way more cliches. Like, yes, you can compare things from different times, but you can't fault one for not being like the other when, you know, KATEKYO HITMAN Reborn came out like 15 years ago or something, you know? At least that's what I think. Sorry for the abrupt ending, but that is all I have for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, remember to like, subscribe, comment whatever you want to down below, and I will see you next time with another video. Bye!